I think the word FinTech has wasted a lot of capital. I don't think that the word FinTech exists.
इतना सच एक साथ मत बोलो भाई.
A full year in venture capital is 3 human years on planet Earth.
We're all Gujaratis from Ghatkopar, so we've all grown together and we're all in it together.
The Gujarat model has reached Bangalore.
So the goal of every business should be to become boring.
Some folks were saying that longevity is going to be $1 trillion industry, and when Bhavin was like, "We're all going to die, guys," I was like, "There goes the $1 trillion
Thank you so
industry."
much. I think we've had 3 near-death experiences.
Focus is all about what you don't do.
So you're not participating in the $7 trillion round that
No,
Sam is.
clearly not.
Hey guys, welcome to the Next Level Podcast.
Bhavin, why is you just said that sleep is your Everest, and I'm assuming is that a common sentiment across the table? First of all, just want to check.
Yes.
Sleep is your Everest as well. It's my Everest as well. How bad is it?
I'm quite certain my score is worse than you guys, by the way, right? And I also have tried every device, every experiment known to mankind with regards to improvising sleep and nothing. So firstly, I have obstructive sleep apnea, which in itself screws you over. So I have a BiPAP device and I am now going in the mandibular adjustment device, etc. But the oxygenation level that I get every single night, I have a ring to measure that. So like my score is never above 7, most cases 5.8 to 7, 5.8 to 7.
And are you do you obsess about your VO2 max score as well?
No, this is for O2 saturation during sleep.
During sleep.
VO2 max for exercise, etc.
By the way, I've used the BiPAP machine, and do you remember the first night you used it? Did you feel amazing the next morning, the first time you used it?
I didn't, so BiPAP's not really helping me much. It's improving my sleep score. So if my oxygen saturation goes below 90%, let's say about 8% of the night, it changes 8% to about 6%. Because zyada fark nahi hai, it's still going below 90%, 6% of the night.
Okay.
Because the obstruction is apparently quite bad. I also did a genetic test on Circle DNA that evidently there is a set of individuals with certain genes, I forget the names of the genes, that need less than 7 hours of sleep. So I'm in that category that needs less than 7 hours of sleep. But invariably I wake up in 6 hours. 5.5 to 6 hours is the max. Now the thing that I don't know is that these people who need less than 7 hours of sleep, does it still impact them though? The needing 7 hours of sleep, genetically you might have the propensity to be able to wake up fresh and work, because I don't find any compromise in my work day. But you're still screwing up your body throughout by getting lesser sleep.
This is why he's starting so many companies, because he's not getting enough sleep.
I have nothing else to do.
Serial entrepreneur. Like no one else.
I began this question thinking that it'll be some relatable content, and then by the end of it, this is not relatable to me. I am not sleeping because I'm just watching Netflix till late in the night.
And I'm watching your memes, but that's fine.
Karthik, what's the struggle with sleep?
Just overworked, I think. I think overworked. Think about too many stakeholders every day before we go to sleep.
I thought portfolio companies are keeping you up at night. Okay,
includes the portfolio founders.
All right.
My wife says you answer portfolio founders even at 1 a.m., which is a worrisome trait. So that I think mine's overworked. Everybody tells me you need to meditate a little bit more before you go to sleep, which I'm not able to discipline because I'm still putting in that last 1 hour. So it's this ugly habit of trying to extract more than 24 hours out of a day.
Understood.
So there's some cheap inside thrill, but I have to get past it if I want to.
What is your greatest weakness? I work too hard.
It is like MBA mein question ki what's your weakness, sir? I can't leave a task.
I'm too obsessed with my work.
Perfectionist.
I'm
a perfectionist is my
वो
greatest
सब नहीं है, बस काम ज़्यादा है.
Bhavin,
Not to my liking. Yeah.
Of all the stuff that I've watched a bunch of your interviews, you almost have you have like a framework, or you go deep into anything that you sort of get curious about. So I just want to talk a little bit more about health. Like, do you have frameworks for sleep, resistance training, diet, or fasting? That seems to be like the holy trinity of health, right? That's the starter pack.
Yeah, so I guess it's mental stress, sleep, diet, and exercise. I guess those are the 4 pillars fundamentally. By the way, historically, anything that I have to repeat more than 3 times has a protocol document.
Yeah.
And if it's delegatable, then it's delegated. If I have to follow it, then I follow it basically. So this involves, for instance, I have not gone shopping for anything in my life for the last 15 years. My clothes, my shoes, my socks, everything is purchased through a document that my assistants have, and it's ensured that it's available at all my homes. How to organize the closet, how to pack my bag, everything as a document.
Are you fun at parties?
Yeah, I'm the life of a party. These are the anecdotes that
I got 5 guys having fun for me right now.
Yeah, protocol is the sexiest word.
Yeah.
So in general, that's a practice we follow. All the dishes that my chefs make, everything has like rating spreadsheets, calorie counting, the works. So
Got
there's
it.
a process for pretty much everything in my life that is repeatable.
Have you guys been following all the stuff that Brian Johnson has been up to with Blueprint? What do we think about the longevity movement? This is open to the whole table, by the way.
So I'll start, by the way. I spent 3 years. So I had this perspective that I do want to live as long as possible, obviously in a healthy manner, all aspects, physical, mental, etc. So live at the age of a 30 to 40-year-old for the rest of your entire life, right? And how can we prolong life? And conceptually, if you go into biology, every single thing that happens to your body is at some extent cellular damage.
Correct.
And then within the cells, there are components. So you've got your, DNA mutation, telomere reduction, lysosomal dysfunction, mitochondrial dysfunction. There's about 9. So there are quite a few papers on this subject, but they're basically, you can classify all damage into whatever 9 or 10 different buckets. And the general concept that all longevity enthusiasts talk about is that this is called this escape velocity of aging, which is, can we ensure the damage is going to happen. You can't hide it. You can't basically defy entropy, right? So you're going to see damage occur, but can your body repair damage faster than it accumulates damage? And there's this fundamental principle that in theory, that's what we've been doing for the first 30 years of your life. All of us know how it was to be 20-year-olds, right? Post 30, it kind of reverses. You start accumulating damage at a faster pace, then your body can repair damage, then eventually you age and die. And I've done like detailed study on molecular biology. For those 2-3 years, I went like really deep. Undergrad molecular biology. I did like a bunch of discussions with lots and lots of people. I hosted tons of longevity talks at my houses, etc. Eventually to realize we're going to die. So let me now get to that conclusion that in our lifetimes, we're not going to see, no matter what anybody says, in my opinion, we're not going to see reaching longevity escape velocity if we ever do. But that's definitely not going to happen in our lifetime. So I know I'm destined to die. So I stopped my research at that point in time because I know I'm anyways doomed to die first.
Fuck it, we go skiing then.
Yeah.
Let's just go skiing and break a few more bones.
But in our lifetime, maybe we won't figure out a way to just live forever. But based on everything that Brian's doing, do you think at least we'll be able to productize the principles of longevity such that we're at least able to dramatically de-age? Or do you think in our lifetime that's
you
possible?
will have healthier... So look, I mean, fundamentally the way it works is that, if heart disease doesn't kill you, cancer will. If cancer doesn't kill you, dementia will. And you cannot change that last piece, period. Obviously, before that, you die through something else. It doesn't really matter. But fundamentally, you'll accumulate damage there. All of this stuff, so now it's about ROI, and there's different people who have different schools of thought. I feel like you should invest a certain amount in living a healthy lifestyle so that the last 2 decades of your life are not going to be full of suffering. Like that is my personal goal. You're going to die eventually anyways, but you want to try and minimize the quantum of suffering. But then it also depends how much time you invest behind it. Right? If you're investing 6 hours a day to achieve that outcome, then you kind of shorten your life in the first place by having to spend 6 hours to achieve that outcome. So then
it's a philosophical conundrum.
I have this last school of thought. Yeah, for me, it's been about the same. And so finding that balance is important. I don't know enough about the science around Brian Johnson, but 2.5 hours a day is a lot to give to this. There's
And
enough to do and
150
enjoy.
supplements.
Yeah, and I don't do too much of the supplements, but enough to do for the next 20 years that I'd rather do that and then age gracefully after that and hang it up.
Some folks were saying that, longevity is going to be $1 trillion industry. And when Bhavin was like, we're all going to die, guys. I was like, there goes the $1 trillion
Thank you so
industry.
much.
People will try. They'll die trying.
people would try and buy, right? See, the hope sells more stuff than fact, right? So
Yeah.
But I think the basics ultimately, for 90% of the people, right? Just the simple things, simple exercise, simple diet, simple sleep, simple health, and go gracefully. I think that is what 90% of the people need, right? I think wo ho gaya to, I think people will be fine. Because at least in India, right, wo 90% basics in here, right? Pareto mein pehle wo karo, fir, we'll get to all of the, the fancy stuff and the cool stuff and all of that, right? I think we just need to get the basics.
That's fair.
And, then person like me coming from Ghatko and being a Gujarati, right? If I can't have my street food, then what's the point of living, yaar? So, pav bhaji to chahiye, boss.
Shortevity.
Very simple. Pav bhaji chahiye.
Flip it.
Flip it.
Anyway, gentlemen, speaking about death, we are here to discuss scaling businesses in India. Please do check out everybody's next level profile if you want to work with any of these gentlemen. Guys, before we start though, I just want to give a quick caveat. I am a comedian. I work in content. I'm also an entrepreneur. And pardon me if some of the questions that I ask make me seem like a novice. But the idea is to have a free-flowing conversation. If I throw a question to someone, feel free to jump in, which we're already doing. I want to begin with you, Bhavin. I mean, it's well documented that you're very versatile and you're doing a bunch of things simultaneously. Some of the stuff that you've also said publicly, that some of the companies that you run, you already found a CEO for it. I want to quickly start off with, when you're doing so much, what are some, just top 2 or 3 time management hacks that founders can learn from? What are some stuff that you have made mistakes with? And what have you learned and what do you do now? Just time management, maybe if we can begin with that.
I mean, I think the biggest time management hack, I don't know if it's time management hack as much as a productivity hack, to be honest, is just focus and no distractions. And it's way harder, way harder. In every respect, actually, it's way harder than you can imagine, which is, I operate on 3 monitors everywhere, by the way. This is again something that I've, generally, everywhere, no matter where I go. I could be in a train, I could be in a plane, I have like multiple monitors. I just find that much more easier, but also means there's more surface area for distraction. So general philosophy, keep your phone silent, upside down. So you, like in computers, they have the notion of interrupts and context switching, right? CPUs context switch when they're interrupted by another process. And then each context switch costs you money. So just first productivity hack, minimize the number of context
switching. Okay.
It's like, pick a task, get it done. Maybe it's a 10-minute slot or 15-minute slot or 30-minute slot, that's fine. And then you finish that and you move on. That point in time, you allow time for interruptions, look at a bunch of stuff, pick the next priority task.
For Karthik, that's like only healthcare on Fridays, like only FinTech on Mondays.
The second one is prioritization, which is something that I think also, it's very easy. This again applies to everything that you do. I talk about it for myself, which is my own task list and my own to-do list. I make this a principle, I call it sort of discovery, implementation, and measurement. And so what I say is that most of us, and especially I see this in organizations, most people spend 90% of their time working. Because it's so freaking easy to work, right? You can pick the next task and find work. Finding work is very, very easy. Keeping yourselves busy is extremely easy. Yeah. But keeping yourselves busy on the highest impact tasks is extremely hard. And so my general principle is you spend 30 to 40% of time on discovery, 30 to 40% time on implementation, and 30 to 40% of time on measurement. And what I mean by that is spend 30% of time to figure out what to do. And only 30% of time doing it. And then another, maybe less than 30, let's say 20 to 30% of your time, figuring out that what you picked up, you expected it to make a certain impact. Well, did it make that impact? And if it didn't, then something went wrong in your discovery process, right? Because you chose that task to prioritize and it did not result in the outcome that you wanted to achieve. So you went wrong in your discovery. So now you got to fix that discovery process, and next time you don't make that same mistake. And you just repeat that dim cycle, 30, 30, 30. And most people, because it's so easy to keep busy, you don't spend time trying to figure out what to do. So prioritization is the next hack.
Sorry, if I could just interrupt here. What was the third point that you were going to make so we can come back to it later?
I think those 2 is probably what I would start with.
Okay,
can you implement these 2 and I think you're
Can you give an example of when you prioritized something and it didn't have an impact, and then you realize that, okay, maybe I should go back to the drawing board with this? Like you said that once you do all 3, you realize that maybe part A is what you need to focus on. Is there any anecdote or
you can do that at a micro level, you can do that at a macro level. Basically at a micro level, you essentially, let's say, I don't know, if I pick let's say product strategy, if I'm working on product strategy and I pick a KPI that I want to improve, saying that, okay, listen, my funnel conversion rates of sign-ups are low, they're at 15%, I want to convert them to 20%. And I have a hypothesis that says that, look, most people are dropping off. I believe if I start with limited discovery, so I don't give time to discovery, I'll come up with the wrong hypothesis because I'll come up with, what I want to do. This is another, perspective that we talk about in our company, which is that we should take every individual and we should basically, inside of their eyelids, carve out the words that you are not the customer. Because all of us try to put ourselves in the shoes of the customer and say, this is what I want, this is what I think, this is what we need to move to, this is what I believe, or rather I know based on knowledge and data, rather than this is what I believe or this is what I know based on like my feeling and perspective basically. So I might come up with the hypothesis if I didn't spend time in discovery and implement it and find that actually it didn't move the needle at all. Now suddenly I wasted time in development, wasted time on building stuff, and now I have to reverse that, right? Because you don't want kachra in the code. So now I have to waste time to actually remove that shit and then start again all over again. But if I had spent ample time on discovery, and this applies at a macro level, I have a framework now because if you ask me what mistakes that I made on whenever I try to identify a new business opportunity, I call them orbit shifters. So there is general work, there's needle movers, the orbit shifters. Orbit shifters, when we're looking at either a completely new product or a completely new market or a combination of the two. But it has to go through this.
Sorry, what are the
framework.
three categories you said? Orbit
So
shift?
there's general execution that you do on a day-to-day basis. That's your general initiatives. Your my OKRs.
Got it. Okay.
Then there's needle movers, which is that if
Needle
I'm picking up a
movers.
KPI, I could do 50 things to achieve that KPI. I could do that one thing that moves the needle dramatically. I'm always asking my team, let's find that one thing instead of 10 things, basically. Let's say you do with higher impact, the better it is. And then orbit shifters are when I'm looking at, it's like an electron's orbit. I think currently my TAM is orbit 1. I want to expand the TAM to orbit 2. I have to either add a product or add a market or add both. Well, that requires capex investment, etc. So that's like I'm wearing a mini hat of an investor. And there I have my business planning framework. It's a document that needs to be prepared across 6 weeks to 16 weeks, depending on how much more time it takes. And it goes through, like, we have this notion of persona, problem, proposition, go-to-market, revenue, moat, and potential. So, and there's a pretty detailed document that I've written down on what all needs to go in each section. And then you perform primary research, secondary research to get to a level of conviction. So for me, business planning goes through like that discovery and then the 0 to 1 and the 1 to 10. And then each of them have sort of respective frameworks and deliverables.
And you do this all while skiing.
Yes, while I'm having my laptop in one hand and the poles in the other hand.
Karthik, it's interesting because it almost feels like Bhavin has designed it for, it's almost like a feedback loop, right?
Yeah.
Whereas an investor's feedback loop is generally longer.
Much longer.
Much longer. So, how do you think about time for yourself?
So we have a saying at Blume where we say that a full year in venture capital is 3 human years on planet Earth. So you don't get feedback loops in an annual cycle.
Correct.
So you have to finish a full cycle of investing, see all the mistakes that are happening, then try to iterate, because the next time you go, you've again raised a fresh bunch of money.
Correct.
You can't screw up the second time. So all the mistakes that you made in that first cycle have to be fixed by the second cycle. Idealistically, hopefully you get better. And while their journeys are 12 to 18 months at most, you need to fix these and move on. I think we've seen that it's impossible to know, because the environment is so sort of wide in terms of the variables that it throws at you. Like, is Tiger in the market or not? Right? It changes everything.
We're talking about a real tiger or tiger.
I think both of them are equally.
Tiger in the market or not.
I think all my friends are Tiger.
Very
Pardon me for
interesting. That was a
that.
variable.
Yeah, but it's important, right? And so then it changes the entire outcomes from that cycle, and then informs you in the next cycle. Shit, you didn't think of that situation where there might be no Tiger there.
Yeah.
And now you have to iterate and build for no Tiger in the next cycle. And so similarly, I think for us, much like entrepreneurs, you have a scaling ambition, which then disrupts your own model. So what I was at a $20 million fund is very different from a $290 million fund. So both of these are being fed back into the team, and it's tough because adapting myself is one thing. Adapting an entire organization to say that you're not that old avatar and you need to move to a new avatar. Same challenges as founders have in scaling people. Like when they were running a 10 crore business versus a 100 crore business, suddenly you realize half the people don't scale. And you try to get 1,000 crores and even sometimes the CEOs don't scale. Right? So these, I don't know why it has to be emotional. It's just,
It is what
life.
it is.
It is life.
Yeah.
Right? So you see in a lot of places, there'll be 4 co-founders and like 3 will be gone by the time it's 500 crores. And there's nothing wrong with it. But it took time for people to understand that that's called business, right? And this is all like this sexy version of entrepreneurship, which we romanticize. But this is danda, this is business. So we go through the same. Thankfully, I think we've been evolving. I think we've been at the right pace. But to be very honest, when you have 290 million, which is 1.5 times more than you had for the first decade plus in one fund, that's actually contributing to those sleepless nights. back to sleep, sorry. But it's tough. It's tough to envisage how this will play out.
Sid, do you concur? Like time management at 10 crore, 50 crore, 100 crore, have you seen it change for
It
you?
is different. I mean, definitely. Look, some things remain the same, right? My sense is, as you grow larger, the amount of time that you spend on firefighting actually goes up because you're away from the day-to-day execution to some extent, right? There is a very good team. Like, for example, in our case, if we have to do like 100,000 deliveries a day, I'm sure the guy who runs operations knows how to manage that. And in fact, he'll do it better than me, right? We could do it when we were doing 100 orders and, we used to go and deliver. But then you're looking at something which is just coming up right there and which perhaps requires you to take a critical call. Should I do this or should I do that, right? So I think, in fact, as things go ahead, there are only two things perhaps we're focused on much more is you constantly need to be continuing to review in terms of what the teams are doing rather than doing yourself. So I keep telling the team, my job is not to do things, but to ensure that you guys do things and I'm reviewing it. And then you have a bunch of time available for firefighting because there will always be something which will come to you, which you will have to decide whether it's one way or the other. And some of these decisions can actually make or break things. The second thing which actually worked for us phenomenally is the fact that I have a great set of co-founders. We've all grown up in the same locality of Ghatkopar. Dharmil, my co-founder, he and I have been friends since we were in junior KG, right? Hardik has been my friend since we were in engineering. Dhaval has been my friend since we were in school, right? So we're all Gujaratis from Ghatkopar, so we've all grown together and we're all in it together, right? So there's one guy doing that thing perfectly and the amount of trust that we have on each other is phenomenally high. So if I know Dharmal is doing something as an example, I don't have to worry about whether he'll do it right or no. Maybe once a week when we meet, we're discussing stuff. So I think that's what's actually worked for us.
The Gujarat model has reached Bangalore.
So that has worked for us, right? If you ask me, the team is actually ensuring that we're able to take care of our time phenomenally well, and each guy knows what they have to do.
The founders watching this like, bro, I need a Gujarati co-founder at this point. Speaking of firefighting, guys, Bhavin, I'll begin with you again. It almost feels like over the last couple of decades, at almost every technological wave, you've had a clear idea of, hey, this is the business that would be perfect for this. We got to talk about AI. Are there any obvious green pastures that you're looking at saying, okay, this is something that clearly stands out to you? I mean, of course you have, but
AI to me is like the internet and 10x of that, in my opinion, if not 100x basically, which is that every avenue is now once again opened up. When the internet, I got fascinated about entrepreneurship very early on, but about the internet and decided something that whatever I want to do, I will do something in the sort of internet space. When I first literally connected on a 2400 baud modem with those cree sounds and started looking at data packets coming from across the world, just opened up a world of possibilities. But I think with AI, I'm very, very, I think I consider myself extremely privileged to have lived through the internet revolution, the smartphone revolution, cloud, perhaps you can call it as sort of an infrastructure revolution, but now also the AI revolution, which I think is going to reshape every single industry. So it's now not just opportunities from a technology standpoint. I think every industry can question how they can imbibe this infinite compute, data access capacity to substantially optimize efficiency. And again, have some perspectives on way we will use it and way the industry is going to evolve when it comes to either interfaces or decisioning or things like that.
Just tell us your next business.
Well, so this is again an interesting question. I honestly believe that my next, there's a lot of small, well, I won't call them small, but a lot of new things that are happening constantly within Zeta, within Titan, companies that I currently already operate, and most of my time is spent, now on Zeta. I think my next now target, once I get to a point where I can detach, which is a while away, because Zeta's goal and objective is to build something that's 100 times bigger than anything I've built so far. So it's got that. By the way, this is another interesting point, and I think Karthik might be able to shed much more light on it. I think I learned after a long time in my life that the biggest variable on how much impact that you can make as an entrepreneur, as an individual, whatever not, the biggest variable is the problem space that you select. And not how much hard work you put in, and not how much capital you raise, and none of that stuff at all. And the problem space that you select, fortunately or unfortunately, has a lot to do with chance. You can do discovery, but the fact is you have to be in the right place at the right time. And I honestly believe with Zeta that it's a once in a lifetime generational opportunity to completely revamp an industry that has been using legacy technology for 30 plus years, that has not seen any change, and we are at the cusp of the opportunity of revamping all of it in a $200-300 billion market, right? So I think the quantum impact I can make out here is actually higher, not because I'm putting in more work, and hopefully I'm certainly wiser than I was before, so that definitely contributes. But I would say vast majority of it is because we just happen to be in the right place at the right time, choosing the right problem with the right people. Then after that, it's about maximizing the amount of capital. So actually then if I step one more step back, all impact is about maximizing the efficiency of deploying capital and people on the right problem, which is his full-time job.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate enough to have been part of amazing teams, amazing companies that I've founded over the last 4 years with really amazing people. I think with Zeta we have truly an opportunity. So, the answer to your question was that I think the next step will be philanthropy. My goal is to essentially, make my notion of impact. I've always believed that each of us has a moral obligation to make an impact proportionate to our potential. And my objective is to take everything that I've built and create a meaningful impact in specifically certain areas.
That is your
education.
Twitter bio, yeah. Karthik, I did a AI founders mixer like 10 months ago, where I met a bunch of founders in building in the space. And now 10 months later, I'm thinking back at what they were building, and I already feel like, holy shit, like 90% of that is redundant.
It's dated,
so
yeah.
as an investor, how are you grappling with this?
I'll be honest, I think we struggle with the idea of can we build anything transformational or foundational with the resources and confidence that we have within Indian shows. I'm being blunt, right? So there are attempts, right? Somebody's funded Bhavish, somebody's funded another team coming out of Nandan's team. So they know the potential of large data sets, and they're essentially saying these are Indianish problems. So this is not what Sam Altman and gang will be building for. So can we build, either language models or data models which are...
That's Krutrim and Sarvam, what
Yeah,
you're mentioning,
yeah.
yeah.
So for us, as a small fund, even if we're there for the party, right? I'm not really transforming anything. So you might say it's silly or whatever, but I think from a Blume lens, if I can't be transformative the way he thinks about transformation, I'm not really keen on playing. I'm not a party round guy, right? I need to own some amount of, have ownership. Founder needs to see me as somebody who's valuable. Otherwise, it's not interesting. So you'll say, no, you'll miss every big thing. It's okay. I've reconciled to that. Also to the idea that India has enough opportunity sets that I'm not worried about it. So when I look at AI, I have a slightly more pedestrian, archaic lens that it was always around. So Gen AI has just fired up imagination of the common population, because now even your kid can, a brother or friend or little 12th grader can go, like my kid's using it more extensively than I am. She's in 10th, right? So it fires up imagination, I get that, and people are building for those new, what can it fire up? But there's a lot of excitement around consumer use cases, which I think will hit a natural roadblock after a point in time. There'll be privacy issues, there'll be scrutiny issues. It's not like, can some engine tell me how best to invest all my money, but I'm also freaked out by the fact that it'll know everything about it.
Everything, yeah.
And to an extent that it would never have known before, right?
So you're not participating in the 7 trillion round that Sam is
clearly not. No, but more importantly, I think if you look at what Ultrahuman is doing,
Correct.
Obviously plug for them, but if you look at even what a agri-robotics play that I have, bizarre, right? So you say, what are you talking about? And suddenly the guy is thinking he can identify every weed that grows between every crop in the world using computer vision, fit them onto tractors and spray the hell out of them, right? So you'll say, what's the value? It actually reduces the amount of pesticide that goes in onto the ground because you're spot spraying as opposed to randomly
just spraying everywhere. Yeah.
And you're using image recognition technology for something very, very unique, right? So does it then eventually enter food value chains, food supply chains, wastage, climate? Health, I think, is going to be the biggest of the lot.
I was going to come to you next.
Yeah. So and those, I think, are being undermined because they don't fall into the sexy popular jargon of how they will be used. What's the application in life sciences? Will future molecules be rolled out much faster? Can machines understand data patterns far better than we ever did? When it comes to the aging debate, are we going to get far more blood markers which actually single us out? So that's what these guys are trying to do. They sneakily push a product every year, get you excited, and they buy it. They're actually mapping out your data better than any guy who said they'll manage medical health records in the last 2 decades has ever done, right? And so you'll say, yeah, but they don't have my blood reports. That also they're trying to hack.
Yeah, correct.
So I'm saying the point is, I think piecing all of that together is humanly impossible, right? For me, the intelligence of AI is where humans could not have deciphered data sets, not just language. Language is like one tool, images is one tool, but this fundamentally, I think, if I had to take a guess, Bhavin will be building sort of a data-first sort of ability to understand philanthropic uses of capital much better and measure that impact back in whatever he chooses, right? And it'll be a bizarre application of AI as understood today. So I look at things that I think fundamentally, this to another point that he was referring to, I have the luxury of getting 6 out of 10 of those things wrong.
Correct.
Even I'm doing the same assessment like he is. But he's doing it within one company. I'm doing it at a portfolio-wide basis. And then my model allows me to make 5 mistakes, 6 mistakes, get 2 okayish wrong. I just need 2 big hits. So I think that's the pleasure of venture capital, that I get to indulge myself in 10 Bhavins a year, whereas he has to live with himself all for 10 years. Right? So I think that's the uniqueness of early stage venture capital. So going back to your AI question, that's what we're looking at. We're actually looking at a drug discovery company in India, which historically people said, oh, what drug discovery? We've tried it for 20 years. Nobody's actually done very well on the space. Not that these guys will, but all of their actual differentiators is new data models, which they can arguably do cheaper, better than a Western company. And I think those are just being sidelined. I'm happy sitting in that corner. Like Pixel, which will put up satellites, the way they analyze hyperspectral imaging data will be the future of how all aerial satellite data will be, is my gut bet, right? So I'd rather bet on that rather than chase something like necessarily hot for the sake of. So I feel there's a lot coming. It's just that it's fragmented.
Sid Vinod Khosla very famously said that, every single person on earth is going to have their own personal doctor. Like, how are you guys thinking about AI and how it impacts you guys?
I subscribe a little more to Karthik's theory that there's 2 levels at which you're going to be investing or doing, right? There are going to be people who are going to build those AI models. And then I think people like us will actually use the capability to get large data sets and get that personalized healthcare to people. Let me give you an example. The largest study to find correlation between food habits and diabetes has been for, I think, if I'm not wrong, less than 30,000 people. Now, through our platform where we're providing medicines to millions of customers and our diagnostics business, which does more tests than any other lab in the country, we're actually analyzing over 2 million records, right? It's like more than 100 times the size of the large data set. Now, one of the very interesting things that has come about is the highest correlation is to consumption of rice. Now, that's the correlation. We're trying to find if there is enough causation. But to think that would we have a capability 5 years back to look at data sets, prescription records, diagnostic data, longitudinal over a period of time, and look at how these patterns have evolved is something which is how we think we can create impact on the ground today, right? Or for example, your ability to get people, today, let's look at the very basics, right? And sorry if it seems very, very, very basic. Today in our country, your health insurance will come into play if you go to a hospital. So if there are 2 people, both of them have diabetes and cholesterol, person A takes the medicines, goes to the doctors, takes care of health, takes care of diet for 20 years, your insurance will give you 0. The other guy does not do anything, goes to a hospital with a heart attack, gets an open heart surgery, you get 10 lakh rupees from your insurance. How can you use these large data sets and longitudinal data to be able to get people a care model where you are actually taking care of their health so that you don't end up in a hospital? How can I ensure that you get your right medicines, you take your medicines, you get your test done, you measure that, and there is a feedback loop that comes on a monthly basis where you can go and do that. Now, to do that at scale without the ability of using AI is impossible. Now, you may have multiple data sets, right? You'll have something coming from ultra-human, you'll have some CGMs, you'll have this, you'll have that, but you need to put these 50 things together to make that happen, right? And for us, that's how we're measuring impact on the ground in terms of ensuring that how can you do this, right? Simple things. And again, very basic. Today, if you go to a supermarket, you buy a bar of soap or a toothpaste, it has a barcode. Medicines in India don't have a barcode. Guys, right? You don't have barcodes on medicine. So, it's a very simple thing. You might feel that उसमें कौन सी बड़ी चीज़, right? So, we are creating barcodes. So, there is that AI, जो हम Sam Altman की बात करते हैं, and then there is something जो on the ground India में, right?
So, you say only pharmacies have barcodes, not the medical lab, the guys don't create
manufacturers नहीं लगाते हैं.
Correct, you're right. Only the pharmacies put the barcode.
Pharmacies खुद से लगाती है. So, now in our system, we are, just 4% of India's medicine, but still, at least we ensure that on every medicine that we sell, we are creating our own proprietary barcode mechanism to ensure that at least medicines that go to people are genuine. Otherwise, 1 out of 6 medicines on the ground that goes to the person is ineffective because either it's handled poorly, it's not done properly. So
There are some things AI cannot solve immediately.
Right. So my point is, you use AI to bring change on the ground using some of these things which Pareto mein ye small changes for people in India will have much larger impact, right? And so I'm sure there are people who are solving AI at a different level. We want to use that AI and make changes at the ground level.
Imagine all this advancement and eventually discovering that rice may not be as good for you, actually.
Yeah.
Bhavin, there's Freshworks, Zoho, global businesses, from India. Just top 3 things that people should avoid and or people should do when they're thinking of building something for the world from here. Following it up to Karthik right after that.
I mean, I have again had my history of all of our B2B SaaS businesses that we've started and still run till date. Almost all of them is all product and engineering in India. Majority of our revenue comes from US. Second highest would be typically Europe. India is always up there because the population, etc. But it's still like number 3, number 4 if I look at all Asia Pac, etc. Just generally because the reality is that like if you take B2B SaaS, I think almost on an average, if I look at all my companies, for the same service, for every dollar that we make in India, we make $2.50 in US. For the exact same service, exact same technology, exact same capability. And that's on an average. Some cases it's actually $6 or $7,
lower
right?
ARPU even in B2B businesses?
Specifically
in B2B businesses.
B2C also, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah,
But because, GDP is higher, propensity to pay, dollar, as a currency.
Correct.
Like all that
Substitution cost as well.
stuff. Substitution cost, all of that, right? In India, if I had to buy a software for employees, as a percentage of their salary cost, it's X. In the US, it's like 1/3 or 1/5 as a percentage of salary. The decision is just so much more faster, easier, etc.
Yeah.
So invariably, you end up making, I would say, the lower end on an average 2.5 times more, generally about 4 to 6 times more for every dollar you can make in India.
So what can people do what are some do's when you're trying to break into a US or a Europe market?
I mean, so I think that, so firstly, I would say it's critical that you do, just simply because there's a bigger pot of gold out there in comparison. I mean, I would say a couple of things. One is that the product quality bar I have seen in India among startups has consistently and considerably improved. There was a point in time I would say that the products that are built out here, and even today there are some India-focused B2B SaaS companies whose typical next destination ends up being EMEA or Southeast Asia, because I don't think the product quality is
Karthik, do you
at a
concur?
bar that you would be able to provide it to US audience.
I'll walk you through the journey, but we also evolved in the thinking.
Second is that you have to understand that yes, there is higher revenue out there, but cost of selling is actually relatively higher in the US. So you can afford to make more mistakes in India. By the way, which is typically what we've done, we build product, get to product market fit, and get to product channel fit in terms of your GTM playbook to a certain extent in India.
You do it first in India?
Yeah, for wherever it's applicable. Wherever it's not applicable, there's no choice. And then kind of replicate that in the US so that we make fewer mistakes, but you can afford to make fewer mistakes in the US. It's in the US, I mean, I've generally seen if you find the right talent, sales operations, sales, etc., it's like a machinery. I mean, there is a very, very well-structured process. I can only talk about B2B SaaS. I've done nothing in B2C in my life, so I have very limited exposure to B2C. But from B2B SaaS standpoint, now again, you're sort of in 3 possible buckets, right? Either you're selling to, and I've sold products in all 3 buckets. You're either selling to micro SMBs/SMBs, or you're doing the mid-market enterprise or the super enterprise. Like Zeta is ultra high, super enterprise focused, very core, because our clientele in US is exactly top 100 banks. That means I have no more than 100 potential clients I have to sell to. So very different sales ball game compared to if you look at mid-market enterprise, looking at probably tens of thousands, maybe about 30 to 50,000 potential clients. You go to micro SMBs, there's millions of potential clients. That's the hardest, by the way.
Oh, really?
Micro SMB is the hardest because you can't afford to spend money to sell because you're making like $60 to $120 to $150 per customer. How much can I cannot have dedicated salespeople going to somebody's office and knocking on somebody's door for that value. But in mid-market and enterprise, I can afford to put a serious sales motion. What I love about Zeta, therefore, is because I have only 100 clients, I can afford to spend an infinite amount trying to make a sale, and it's still barely, it's a drop in the ocean compared to our total cost. Right? So you have to make
higher CAC is good in this particular
insanely good, because it's very few companies like GoDaddy, Intuit, our domain registrar business to a certain extent, like very few companies have got micro SMBs, right? Because it's very, very hard to break into that market.
So here again, what category you choose makes all the difference. Interesting. Karthik?
So our learning, actually in Fund 1, ironically, because we had such little money and we used to give such tiny checks, we ended up underfunding most guys for this ambition. So you would say there is a cross-border opportunity, funding around 2 crores. And so what do you expect the founder to do? So economy maybe paisa ud jata hai, right? Leave alone trying to put a team there and actually move there.
But that funded pretty okay, as we recently discovered.
Funded okay, to their credit, a lot of them survived by building in India. So I'm answering 2 different questions.
We can get to the second part.
So the point I'm making is that if you really, really want to have a shot, I think you have to have clarity that the founder is willing to, in most cases, step out of their comfort zones and get abroad. And I'm not talking about a brown-skinned guy in the US who's well established. That's West Coast investing. I don't get a shot at it, right? Maybe Nexus does because they have a team there, but very few Indian investors will find them. Why will they take money from Blume? So I'm finding a founder here who has an ambition to go challenge the US sort of dominance. Not saying I'll win the market. That's the beauty of the US or selling overseas. You can be the number 10 guy in a multi-billion dollar company, right? And you can also sell in hard cash for multi-billion dollars if you get to that point.
It's almost like a deal breaker, saying, are you definitely going to do this?
Our internal joke is condition subsequent is your L1 filed. Right? Or condition precedent is otherwise, why the hell are you actually taking the money from us?
Correct.
And one thing I disagree with Bhavin and our experiences, and maybe he's tweaked it and he's had his personal money, so he's been careful about how to balance this. If you send the founder down and you say it's okay to actually go build your initial thing in India, they actually build a different product. Because you're catering to try and optimize the 60-70% gross margin for that $1, not for the $6, right? So you find the use case which is justifiable. You find like the application to actually be able to get the guy to buy, right? You're not thinking about the American customer, right? Yeah. So you actually get PMF wrong, I feel.
That solution doesn't fit everybody.
That's super dangerous in my view. And then poor guys are running around EMEA, Philippines, Malaysia, because that is exactly the parallel. You can't go to the US and sell. And that pivot to do after $10-20 million of revenue can happen, right? Actually, take one step back. In the land of no VCs, all of this is acceptable. Because there's nobody pushing you. You are the entrepreneur pushing yourself, right? So if there's a mass tech or there's a persistent, nobody went and told them aise banao, right? Banate gaye, 20 years, compound okay. Recently I heard Persistent is a $7-8 billion company with $1 billion of revenue. When I met the founder 10-12 years ago, it felt very small because we went for LP check. How did it happen? Because 15 years of compounding before that, no problem. What does a venture capitalist want? The greedy fellow wants all that to be done in 8 years. 10 years.
Correct.
That's artificial, right? Now, if you want those artificial outputs, then you have to engineer different inputs. You can't take your own sweet time building 60 crores, you say, badhiya business hai. Then I'll switch on, okay, now I'll think my wife's agreed that I move to the US, where she'll come with me. Gone, boss, 6 years are gone. And that's what happened to us a lot. So now we are very, very selective about how we pick cross-border. And I love the energy in SaaS Boomi and SaaS startups and all this great. 80% of them are not making that cut I just defined, right? And so I'm just saying, why are we playing, right? So even after I see success in our own portfolio and in the ecosystem for SaaS companies, it sadly continues to be 20% of our portfolio construction by diktat. I won't go beyond that. Until I've proven to myself that I have these cross-border billion-dollar companies. I don't have a unicorn yet in that space. When I see it, I believe it. I don't believe other people's unicorns. So that's my philosophy.
Sid, when you're scaling, what are some things that you've seen are, at least in personal anecdotes would be useful. What are some things that started breaking in the organization as you started scaling? And what did you do to start patching them together next time around?
I think sometimes we've had swung between 2 different ends of the pendulum. Sometimes we've not built imagining that we'll actually scale up so fast. To give you an example, from 2015 to 2020, we moved our warehouse 8 times in Mumbai alone. Because every single time we did not anticipate that it will grow this fast, right? So we did that 6 months, we were like, shit, we're out of space, right? Then, okay, we're out of space. Oh, we're out of space.
Further and further away from Ghatkopar as you.
Yeah, as you can imagine, right? But now you also restrict to Khawai, right? But so this is a practice, like you sometimes cannot yourself imagine how much things can grow, and if the product market fit is right, how fast you'll go. And in a space like ours, it's not easy because it's not just like I open a warehouse and I do it. Every warehouse has to be certified by the FDA, and it's not easy to get all of that going and moving and so on and so on. Right? So
It's medicine, so yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a small, silly example, but I can tell you it's a lot of pain to continue to do that. And then there are some times when you swing at the other end of the pendulum, right? That sometimes in building teams, right? You believe that because you've had such great success in certain product market fits, you will invest a lot behind building a product, and then you realize कि इसका monetization नहीं है.
Over preparing for obvious PMF that's
Right?
impending, right?
So that like I'll give you an example. Our product Docon, it's used by, if I'm not wrong, the most pediatricians in the country and over 5,000 doctors, right? Our thesis was that, you know what, we'll go to doctors and we'll create a SaaS revenue, etc. They love the product but unwilling to pay, right? So we built a phenomenal product, right? I'm very proud of the product, but there's no monetization, right? And then one fine day you tell the team, guys, sorry, it's not making the cut. And then you say, okay, now I have a great product. Now I'm going to move this team to do something else. So we've swung at both ends of the pendulum, right? Where we've never prepared ourselves for, I mean, the smart thing would be to build a warehouse which will at least last for 3-4 years, right? Not every 6 months or 9 months. And sometimes you put just so much energy behind a product because you're like, oh wow, this is working and the traction is great, and you'll monetize, and then you're like, sorry guys, it's not working, right? So I think I can continue on and on about the number of things that have not worked, right? I think I have a list of things which have not worked for us.
Guys talking the warehouse, like, it's time to move already. I'm still talking.
क्या करूँ मैं अभी?
I have gone through kind of luxury of having made every mistake that's possible to be made in my history. I have this general thought process of every new business going through what I spoke about earlier: planning, discovery, scaling, and steady state. And I have now very clear deliverables and defined boundaries as to when something moves from stage A to stage B. So planning, I told you before, is that you want to start a new, whatever, call it venture, business, etc. You got to have conviction behind and hypothesis behind, who's your persona, what's the problem you're trying to solve, why is your product proposition 10x better than what exists in the market, what is going to be your go-to-market, what is going to be your monetization, what is the moat, and what is the overall potential, because the overall potential is smaller than none of the other variables matter, basically, right? From there, you move to discovery, which is what we all call as, build an MVP to get PMF. So build a minimum viable product, get product market fit. And you have to have a definition of product market fit, which is your customers have to want your product. Customers will be very disappointed if your product gets discontinued, and they're willing to pay. There's a revenue stream.
Problem
and
is
there's
the
a
third
product channel fit, meaning that you might actually have all three. You have a product that's product market fit that people want, they're willing to pay, but you don't have a scalable channel where LTV is greater than CAC. So you want to start with a scenario where LTV can at least be 2.5x or 3x of CAC. You get CAC payback within 12 months. Now you start optimizing the 12 to 6 and the 2.5 to 5. That's basically so you start at the variable of, so that's
Seems so simple.
Yeah.
So it's
Sounds like
I think the good thing with Bhavin is everything has a template, and it's just so easy. Everything's a template, and it's a model, and you just create unicorns every year. I
A
think
का
it's-
क्या लेना देना?
Yeah.
So tell me, Bhavin, do you follow your gut or data?
Yeah.
It's like the James Bardale quote, right? If you have data, let's talk with
do data, yeah.
If you have opinion, if all you have is an opinion, then let's go with mine. So I fundamentally followed data. That's so the PMF, so discovery stage has a clear deliverable of asymptotic retention curve, where it should be, what should be LTV, what should be CAC, etc. on at least one channel. And I think people realize, he spoke about both scaling too soon, scaling too late, etc. Is that unless you have this, you don't move on. You want to spend minimum capital here, like as low amount as possible to get to that outcome.
MVP PMF.
And then scaling is not so discovery is about strategic innovation. In fact, that's why you also need different skill sets of who's leading. I love leading the planning and discovery state. Halfway through scaling, I'm like, let's delegate. Because during the planning and discovery state, you have to constantly innovate. You have to you're dealing with vagueness. You're dealing with a large number of unknown unknowns. In fact, by the end of discovery stage, by the end of planning stage, you want to cover more than 60% of unknown unknowns. By the end of discovery stage, you want to cover 80 to 90% of unknown unknowns. In the scaling stage, your philosophy should be, I have execution innovation, not strategic innovation. Which means that There is a playbook and I'm simply repeating it and keeping on optimizing efficiency. You cannot be in the scaling stage saying, oh shit, I did not figure out those 20 variables, now to figure them out during scaling. Then you're scaling too early, you're going to waste capital, basically. So you want to get to that. That's the point in time when you want to then say, now I have one channel and I have a product. The channel has got LTV greater than CAC. The product has got product market fit. Now I will scale for that channel, build a playbook for that channel. You want to discover a new channel, you go back to the discovery process and make sure this product channel fit for that second
You
channel.
oscillate between the two phases, I'm assuming. Right?
Yes, and then finally you get to steady state. So the goal of every business should be to become boring.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we say in Zeta. Like, our goal is become boring. So you get to that stage where that particular business, you might be starting 3 new, but make
So
that first business boring.
That's when a public market analyst can dissect your numbers. Because it's predictable and boring. And
predictability.
One just corollary to add to him, at once Hitesh and me went to school together, Hitesh Oberoi of Naukri. Once he was on stage about 10 years ago, and he said something very interesting, which I used a lot with my founders, where he said, once the founder leaves the product room, innovation stops. So this is interesting. This is his persona, clearly. It's actually true of most founders. They didn't start to get to the boring phase and run that piece. Right? They didn't want to get to the boring phase and say, oh man, I'm dreaming about that 8-year point where I will be running this super boring business. Right? That's not why they start. They start because they're obsessed about solving for that problem for that customer. The corollary is actually very interesting, which is the founder should actually step back a little. It might not be a bad thing if you found that early. In Naukri, they found it early. They said, it works.
Already at steady state.
Yeah, so they went public. Think about it, right? I think he started in 96, Hitesh joined him in 99. 2006, they've been profitable all through. Hardly ever used the ICICI Bank 7 crore investment. Went public, profitable. And every deal after that was secondary market. Means basically, India was looking for a place which is a resume database and they figured it out. So you didn't need anything else. Really. So my point is, the boring part, if it comes early, don't complain. Go start another business, which is what they did. That's why they made a lot of money on Zomato. They made a lot of money on Policy Bazaar. They didn't try to stupidly innovate in Naukri. It was working. It's a machine, right? So if you think about the second and third order wealth in InfoEdge, it's from investments, not from the core. So it's fascinating, right? I just thought of that when you were talking about how you think. Every founder thinks that way. But don't waste your time. I think the difference between his thinking, if you can notice now, and a consumer startup in India, is half the consumer startups went and did all this experimentation while the money was burning. They didn't figure this out perfectly. There was just this urgency to get to like a scale which was half of it was artificial, right? Because the math around, whether it was LTV CAC math or whether the distribution model never worked or unit economics would never break even, was secondary hai, bahut paisa hai abhi, right? Ye gawaya to kya hua, 200 aur aayega.
Which brings me to the question, Karthik. This is, it's something that, over the last couple of years, I've spent time in Bangalore. A lot of tech businesses in India are also ops heavy, right?
You know.
Yeah, he would know. That's why I looked at you. And we've gone from growth at all costs to unit economics profitability at all costs. But do you think this is flavor of the season or do you think how possible is it when you have to marry tech and ops?
No, I have an opinion, but he's the practitioner. So I think he should get the opening dibs on this.
So look, I think it is ultimately, I'll go back to what he said, right? Yeah, startup, entrepreneur is a very romanticized way of saying dhanda karna. Ultimately, every dhanda has to make money. That's the bottom line.
I just love the ghatkopar that comes in.
That is the bottom line, right?
Yeah.
And
that's the Gujarati speaking.
He has to have respect certain community.
I love it. I love it.
So, along the way, bhatak sakte ho, but ultimately you have to come back to where you are, right? That's the bottom line, right?
Correct.
And my sense is, with most, at least all the peers that I speak to, there is a genuine use case to grow ops heavy businesses in a profitable way, right? Obviously, you will have to tweak. It will come at the cost of cutting your internal flab. It will sometimes come at the cost of changing the way you are looking at things, letting go of some customers, looking at certain other customers, but वो जो sprint था, you'll have to start now thinking of it as a marathon. It's very simple, right? I mean, if I expect कि 1,000 crore से 6,000 crore revenue चला गया in 3 years, it's not going to go from 6 to 24. वो 6 का 8 होगा, 8 का 10 होगा. Now you have to, I mean, the hardest part is for the founders and the team to rewire themselves mentally. I still believe that most founders are phenomenal in terms of adapting and execution. But you have to first agree that this is what I want to go and do, rather than doing this, I want to do this. I think once you do that, I don't think it's not possible, right? And we've seen it in, I mean, you look at everything from publicly available of Zomato to, you know, your Policy Bazaar to whatever, and even for most, I would say, privately held companies, right? People have come to that self-realization and said, guys, fine, we need to do that, right? So, and I mean, if a company like us could go from a burn of 90 crores a month to a profit of 10 crores a month in 18 months, I'm sure everybody can do it, right? It takes tough calls. Yes. You have to swallow your pride sometimes, but it's fine. Go ahead and do it.
So I think the VCs have a little bit of blame, if not a lot of blame.
I was going to ask him, yeah.
No, it's in the sense that greed should have a limit, right? Of how quickly you want to grow and get to that scale, especially in ops dhanda businesses. Correct. Where you can artificially keep pushing that, but to what end, right? As we saw, as he said, from the public market examples, basically the market, the wisdom of the public market, in my opinion, is about 10x more than the wisdom of the private market, right?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. So when the public market has judged you, you know where you went wrong, slapped you down, and then you climb back up step by step. You've reached back that point, kudos, right? But it was possible. It shows it was possible.
Correct.
Therefore, if you had controlled your greed on terms of how quickly you needed to scale it and how recklessly you didn't need to scale it, you would have figured this out a little earlier. I think the return on capital employment is skewed in B2C in this country, right? We could have achieved the same outcomes with about half the capital, is my humble take, right? What have we done in the process? We have built a phenomenal workforce. There's 2-3 lakh people trained. So a lot of people say, "Itna ghata ho raha hai." So I look around and say,
Vaccinated some things.
आपका किसी का पैसा गया क्या इसमें? India's participation in this is less than 10%. It's some poor Canadian pensioner, American endowment, etc.
It's boomer money. We're enjoying boomer money.
But
Indian customer का तो फायदा हुआ.
VC to C is the business.
सबको फायदा.
Customer का तो सबको फायदा हुआ.
You build data infrastructure, you build people, you built like new ways of new business models, all on the back of foreign capital, which took crazy risk on Indian entrepreneurs. We've all benefited. I'm not saying therefore you should hoodwink that. You're responsible, and we should appear as super responsible, super sort of successful, delivered outcomes. If not in 24, by 27, then we'll rock. Because people say, gosh, all we needed to was to calibrate a little. अब देश की समझ में आया कि ज़रूरत से ज़्यादा पैसा नहीं देना चाहिए. Once you calibrate, these guys rock it. They've shown they can rock it. Now give them more money, and the second wave will start. I think it's a matter of 26 or 27. Now going back to your original point, I think that we actually, for example, we've seen in most businesses in India, half of our consumer businesses are region specific or city specific, right? They start doing groceries in a city, something. And now we say that if you don't believe in building profitability in a region, we don't want to be your investor, right? There is this theory that you can throw $100 million at the problem and try to solve Delhi, Chennai, Hyderabad, Bombay, Bangalore, everything at the same time. And we call it
far more money.
We call that bullshit because the guy hasn't figured out how to make a single rupee in Bangalore. How do you know how you'll make money in 5 cities with all the variables, labor, local complexity? You don't even know how to hire into the second city, but you've given money and you've thrown it at
it. It might be slower though, but that's fine.
No, it won't be slower. It will actually
eventually,
in the long run, it'll be faster.
You're actually going to be distracted trying to solve problems in 20 different places, not just waste capital. Capital is one wastage. Okay, as you said, Canadian pensioners, but which I have some empathy towards also. But you're also wasting people's time, right? I mean, I think I will articulate it slightly differently, which is instead of profitability, I'm saying that look, I'm okay if the company is not profitable. I'm saying that that's why I said it's orbit shifter notion, which is new product, new business. So new region would be, new product, new market. So new region would be new market. I'm saying, are you generating positive ROE on each orbit shifter? Do not start 2-3 more until you've got positive ROE. This is equity I'm putting into it. The return that I'm getting is a positive ROE, and then keep improving that positive ROE. You're getting positive ROE on one, you start 1 more or 2 more or 3 more, depending on cut bandwidth, capital, and people you have. So you want to get to, so as a group, you might keep reinvesting your profits to other orbit shifters that are going to require capital. I mean, Amazon, had a long gestation period for the same reason. But you have to keep getting to positive ROA in each of them. At some point, eventually, you'll be profitable also as an organization. But that's the benchmark. But if you want to simultaneously try 10 different products, I think, some of the best entrepreneurs, I have to learn this a lot, by the way, focus is our biggest weakness. Huge appreciation for like Steve Jobs or Frank Slootman, or they keep preaching this notion of focus, and it's all, it's very easy to say, but it's very hard to focus is all about what you don't do. Saying no and focusing on the areas that substantially narrower surface to be able to get an outcome before you kind of add to the surface area. And I think that's one of the biggest weaknesses that most founders have. Like there was a point in time when no matter which business you were, probably still to a certain extent, no matter which business you were also a FinTech. Why Q, yeah? Why? Why are you adding a wallet for no reason at all? Why are you adding lending money for no reason at all? You have a primary business. Focus on that primary business. Get that to positive ROE before you start adding additional businesses that have no. And actually, I like the statement you made, which is that how InfoEdge looked at it. Like they got to that steady state. And it wasn't like they converted in. They said, okay, fine, let's now invest in other potential profit pools. And now they're constantly building on that. I think hats off to Sanjeev and the team.
The only caveat on the FinTech piece is most people have realized that core dhande mein kabhi bada business nahi ban sakta hai. FinTech might be a bigger business to build. So it's very tempting to move into that and make that the core.
I actually have a philosophy about
this is top of funnel.
I have multiple times.
Eventually, lending is a feature.
Feature like core business ho gaya, one feature ho gaya.
N number of times. I think the word FinTech has wasted a lot of capital. I don't think that the word FinTech exists. In my opinion, you're either Fin or you are Tech. There is no such thing as FinTech. If you're Fin, you are a manufacturer of financial products and services, you're a licensed entity, you're regulated, be happy with the cap 25% return on equity. Do not dream of getting 300% return on equity. And make sure you follow regulation, make sure you follow compliance. Make sure it's a risk management balance sheet business. It's not a technology business.
That lesson has been hard delivered now, I think.
It has, but people
multiple
don't realize
times.
that.
Itna sach ek saath mat bolo, Bhavin.
And if you're tech, then be a technology service provider. Stop lending money. Stop.
But aap FinTech ho, no?
No, we're a technology service provider. We very clearly state that Zeta.
But you serve only financial services as an industry.
We serve, yes. So we're, and I think somebody came up with a new term, tech fin, because FinTech is so just abused in its entirety. I keep saying I'm not a FinTech because FinTechs are neobanks, FinTechs are lending companies.
The only nuance I will add is, because to his point, every country, every sub-market, like there'll be some UK guy pitching me about coming into India. Straight away cancelled, right? He's cancelled out. Do you even know what you're talking about? Because operating within even a geographic border is dealing with every regulator in that financial service.
भाई तूने news पढ़ा है पिछले हफ्ते?
नहीं ये पहले था, but फिर भी insurance हुआ, banking हुआ, mutual funds हुआ, whatever your product you're dealing with, there's a different regulator for you.
Correct.
There's a different stick. To his point, 25%, great business, grow like that, and much like retail, like if you do physical retail, you can't call it retail tech or commerce, e-commerce. You can't. You're faking it. It's retail, right? Same idea applies here.
Yeah, but Uber is ride hailing. It's not, I don't know, mobility tech.
Yeah. It's ride hailing.
Essentially, it's a taxi dhanda that you're using tech to improve the efficiencies, basically.
So this confusion, I think, is created. Not a bad thing. Eventually, all of us, Uber is making record profits right now. Eventually, the model is powerful enough, but if it's misunderstood as tech and tries to get those kind of multiples. So what did everybody play? They played this fake multiple game.
Correct.
To justify fake valuations and give them more money than they required. If that same guy had to raise not 2 billion and 1 billion, he would have raised half the money. And he would have adapted. He wouldn't have diluted twice, right? Twice as much. So the last point I was making was, despite Bhavin discrediting FinTech, before financial services, actually, Wall Street was built on the foundation of FinTech. Financial services in the US, in my opinion, is the most cutting edge adopter of tech after pawn. Or before pawn. If you look at consumer tech, it's pawn. If you look at enterprise tech, it's financial services. So that's why people say, hey, this is where the frontier is. If it has not reached those two industries, it means it's not yet mainstream. And that's why if you walk into a Goldman Sachs building even today or 10 years ago, on Wall Street, you go to 90 Wall Street, which is Goldman Sachs, lunch hour, tons of desis will be walking out. Without them, the dhanda doesn't run. The pipes and bricks, everything are built by desis, right? who might have been exported from here. But there is a boatload of tech to be able to run financial services. Sadly, it got overridden by this fake notion of what is FinTech. And the only reason I'm defending all of this, मेरे पास है 4-5 FinTech, which are legit FinTech.
But I think the key difference, I think the key, by the way, I'm only talking about FinTech in...
Tech-fin.
I'm only talking about this FinTech notion in terms of banking and, deposits, credit, lending, etc. Where fundamentally, I think what folks don't realize is, it's a balance sheet, capital-oriented ROA business. See, Uber still doesn't have a entirely capped ROA because fundamentally it's an ecosystem that's at the marketplace that's connecting distributors, drivers to
It's a tech
customers.
business.
Buyers, yeah.
In a bank or even as a fintech, if you're lending money, you're borrowing money.
Yeah.
Correct.
To borrow money, you have to put up equity. You take the world's best technology, you cannot change the fact that your ROE cannot be higher than 25 to 30%. And if your cost of funds, if you don't have a bank's cost of funds, eventually all you're doing, in my opinion, all lending fintechs are taking thin file customers and making them ready for banks to take at lower cost. I literally feel if you're a lending fintech, essentially what you're doing is going out of the market, finding people who cannot borrow
Valuations
money.
of all fintechs going down.
And you're essentially handing them over to banks.
This was called subprime in the US.
Correct.
And basically, Capital One became a multi-billion-dollar business on the back of it. There is value in it because the bank can't evaluate or judge a thin file customer
Sure.
adequately without all the tech tools, right? So these guys claim that they're doing a better job. Eventually, time will tell. But I think you're opening up new customer banks.
I mean, we already had a 2008. Which,
We did, but I'm saying in India, we're severely underbanked. Like I was speaking to someone, I just flew in from Hyderabad. Some brother says, this guy, I said, what does he do? He says, he lends money. So I said, what do you mean he lends money, right? He says, that's all he's been doing. There's an entire industry. And I said, what is his cost of borrowing? He's ready to take money at 17, 18%. So that means he's lending at 24, even now. And we're not talking like pocket change here, right? We're talking about only multiples of crores. And that is in high society Hyderabad, right? So there's no shortage. You have to formalize the entire economy. Therefore, there's an opportunity. I love my slice. I love my turtle mint. All of that is great. But it should not be run with like tech expectations.
300%, 500% ROE.
So that's why private equity should start, like if not public markets, PE should start coming in at 300, 400 million. Because the returns from there on profile should look like a PE business, not like a tech business with guzzling money and So this breakup of people's heads on what constitutes a venture capital funded business, private equity funded business, which is in this country sadly almost identical to a public company, and a public company business. This has not been segregated. So everybody wants to throw money just because they got more as if it were venture capital. No, this is all not venture capital.
would this be true even for edtech, like the same philosophy from fintech to edtech?
I think jury's out. I don't know whether you both have an opinion.
I see, look, I think this is all semantics, by the way.
Of course.
For me, semantics is that you're either a technology service provider, in which case the value that you're creating is a SaaS or a software platform that improves somebody else's efficiency for whatever business or industry they are.
Very expensive semantics.
Yeah.
Right?
Or you're in the education business. That means your product is content and content delivery. And you are tech enabled in that particular scenario. If I would say Amazon, AWS is a tech business and Amazon is essentially a retail business. So you have to understand the semantics of that. Yes, you can generate efficiencies using technology, but you want to make sure you stick within the classification. There are certain variables that just you can't suddenly multiply them by 10x just because you add the word tech to it.
And therefore the same analogy applies in India by the same breakup of how financial service and fintech applies. Education and education tech, edtech are about the same mix.
I actually want to... This is actually for everyone. So over the last 10, 20 years, we're now seeing like founder evolution has happened. We're seeing second time, third time founders, which means everyone's learned a bunch of pitfalls. A lot of folks began very, very simple mission driven and then eventually discovered that, hey, there's this cohort that I want to get into. People have the second and third companies are often niches. I just want to ask, Karthik, beginning with you, how have you seen the evolution of founders? The India 1, India 2 story is pretty popular. Are you seeing that first-time founders are also conscious about this? Like the journey from mission to mercenary almost. That's what I wanted to ask. What your take on that is?
It's a good take on it. But
Strong word, I know. Mercenary is a strong word, but
it's
that's the framework that I heard someone talk about. So I just thought I'll.
I think
throw it
the
up.
complexion of first-time founders changed dramatically too. They might have worked for a mercenary, right? So that's good enough sometimes.
Yeah, or the myth has traveled, right?
Yeah,
So
myth is okay. I think you need to put in the hours, right? You have to be a practitioner. All this inspiration is okay. Doesn't count for much, is what I've realized. But now you've had the playgrounds. Like somebody like Bhavin's given him the opportunity or her the opportunity to grow like a $10 million business. Suddenly they come out like super emboldened, right? No IIT, SHIIT, all of that doesn't matter. This doesn't matter far more. So believe it or not, our pipeline in Fund 1 used to be Wipro, Infosys kids. Or did I use senior citizens? I meant senior people, right? 35-year-old, 40-year-old. And there's prejudices against them, right? If not by us, by the next level. It's like, ye kya karenge? They're not hot enough, right? So that has dramatically changed from 2016, 17. And I would say, if you just look at the trend line very quickly, like you look at Kunal Shah, Mukesh Bansal, Ashish Kashyap, Raghu, Aprameya, all between, Aprameya when he came, poor guy was early enough in the curve that his seed round is 2 million and that was record breaking, right? By the time you reached, Ashish Kashyap was 30 million because he'd built IBBO.
correct.
So what does that mean? So basically, there are, in my simple, like how he has simple rules and metrics, I have a 0 to 10 journey. 10 means you've built $1 billion business or gone public, right? 0 is what you're asking, how many people do I fund anymore there? Actually, alarmingly lower than where it was 10 years ago. So the post 0 guys that I let the pre-seed funds now handle have become lazy. It's too much babysitting, right? In a good way, right? They have to learn a lot. I just don't have the bandwidth, energy, and time. Neither do my team members. And we don't, a capital, you can't give $2 million to babysit. You can give $500,000 to make mistakes. So that's not my cup of tea anymore. So I therefore wait for these second-time founders or people who have been trained by mercenaries or missionaries in that sense, right? And we're finding them now by the dozens. The only thing then to validate is actually, are they truly missionary or they're just being coy by like picking up, because I have this cool resume, I think I'm like this hot founder, and therefore the VC will plunk $5 million at me. And there's a very fine line. If you're not able to judge that, I don't think every second-time founder will be widely successful. So my preferred set is the person who's made it to about 4, not the 9, 10. I can't handle the 9, 10. They come like as if, by the way, some of them might be richer than my fund or half my fund or something, right? Mujhe kya respect dega?
I think outside of like, wait, there's an India 1 and there's an India 2 and there's an India 3. Are there some other obviously glaring patterns that founders have realized over the last 15
Oh, you're saying
years?
how they divide the market up?
Not just divide the markets up, but other patterns. Like everyone's realizing, there's an India 1, India 2.
It's ballsy, but like, look what Mohit's trying to do, right? He's moved to Abu Dhabi, he's trying to build Ultrahuman from there. If you look at Tushar at Healthify, if you look at some of our EdTech, health tech, they're basically saying, so what if you're a Desi consumer company? We can win against the world.
Got it.
So they're going beyond India 1, 2, 3.
Some of you might be aware, there's a company called Tootsie, which makes aligners. It's run by my wife, right? So she's the founder and the CEO. Up to that same point, right? I mean, people never thought that she's an orthodontist, no formal business education, starts something and says, we'll build aligners with a US FDA approval, right? Sitting right here in India. The ambition that I see now, her or other peers having, is just phenomenal, right? I mean, our idea was, can I serve Mumbai? Their idea is, okay, we're happy to take the plunge, build something out, but we'll build it, like he said, right? I'm going to build for the world. Right? I'm not just going to think about what I can build for India, but I'll use India as a base and now build for the world. I think that is a big theme happening. What was earlier happening only in software, now I think it's happening in a lot of other areas where, I mean, you look at, people from building your drones to your satellites to your products to manufacturing. I think people are now saying, I'm going to build world-class quality, not something will just pass the Indian standards, but global standards.
So what I would like to see by 2035 is this trend line of 15 software companies that have become unicorns, including his, to get to about 100. So that, as you said, we had all the DNA. Everybody said IT services, hundreds of thousands of people have been trained for 30 years. Of course, it would have happened. This is unobvious. The deep tech part, where people didn't have belief, but we have a proximity to 4 or 5 unicorns in that space. Nobody's crossed that line. And then consumer, for the first time, will start seeing that ambition. This is what I would... The deep tech part is not about second time. It's about does that person know the science and tech to be able to go and win? So actually, ironically, 4 or 5 of our top deep tech guys are college grads. So forget about experience. They've never worked a day in their life for anybody else other than themselves.
Consumers probably the hardest, right?
Consumer is the hardest.
yeah.
There, I wouldn't touch a guy who's not a second time or she's not a second time founder who say like, I have courage, capital, conviction to get out if I have to and go to a market where I can understand the product, the need better. ये देश में बैठ के आपकी consumer नहीं बना सकते for global eventually. That ambition is stepping up in second time founders, which is wonderful to see. For me, look, it's not about greed of scale and venture. It's a cottage industry, only so much time in the 3-year period. You can only do N number of companies. You want to do those N number of companies as really stuff that you believe in and you're really passionate about. 7-8 मिल ही जाएंगे आपको 3 साल में. It's not like एक छूट गया तो my life's come to an end. Like the founder might feel that way. अरे ये तो मेरा dear plan था. It's the only thing I was dreaming for 5 years. And they move on. The next guy comes, right? There's something else you'll find in the middle of the year. So that's kind of our philosophical take on it.
Bhavin, do you have a framework of when you're investing? Second time founder, third time founder? Is there a
I
pattern
don't
you look
invest. I really very, very, very rare. Few friends, etc.
I've tried, sir. कुछ नहीं आता.
I don't. I have 2 buckets of capital basically. There is a non-risk capital bucket. So my entire family office fund. There's non-risk capital bucket. It's all was sitting in like 0.5% yield. Now, freaking 5.5% yield.
Amazing, no?
6% yield. It's insane, right? But entirely non-risk. The second bucket is entirely risk. It's all my own companies where I have an active involvement in some form or the other. I'm not really a
He's his best VC.
passive investor.
I think it's exactly the same thing for, at least I think of it more like at family level, right? I mean, there's an interesting anecdote about, and again, we were talking about being Gujarati some time back, right? So when we started, right, and I'll touch a couple of points. We spoke about lack of capital, growing in one city. Couple of interesting anecdotes. When we started, nobody was believing in what we were doing. The only guy crazy enough was my father, who pledged our home and his hospital to give me money. My other co-founder, Karthik, his grandfather pledged his home to give us money. And the third co-founder, Dharmil, his father gave us the office, right? That's how we started. So there was absolutely nothing. With that focus capital, पहले 4 साल सिर्फ मुंबई में बनाया. अच्छा हुआ, we grew. So everybody talks of the PharmEasy from 2015, 2016. Nobody talks of the Dial Health from 2012 to 2016, which was just pure our personal capital. And had we gone belly up, सब घर बार के बिना हो जाते, right? I mean, that is how it was. Surprisingly, till 2018, we did not spend a single rupee on an ad, right? And a lot of ways, what you were saying, right? That greed of, वो तब तक मस्त चला था. 0 से हम 300-400 करोड़ पे आ गए थे. Maybe 400 करोड़ से 4,000 करोड़ पे आ गए. But that greed कि नहीं मुझे 1,000 से 6,000 जाना है 3 साल में, right? That is where all that, if I may call it that Guju wiring, completely, went berserk.
Short circuit कर दिया VC.
Short circuit. नहीं, ठीक है. I mean, no blaming anybody. No, right?
No, eventually the founder has to take the help.
Right? I mean, it was
They're all
my call.
enablers.
It was my call, right? So full ownership for that. But fine, you ultimately find a way. But the way he's saying, right? I mean, from a family perspective, it's very simple. Either the money is in what somebody in the family is doing, or the money is outside an FD. There's like no angel investment. So no, 10 साल हो गए, maybe more. No public market. So no stock market, no mutual funds, no LIC, no debt mutual fund. कुछ नहीं. It's either in FD or money in businesses run by some person in the family, right? And actually all the other people in my family put me to shame. So they're all doing...
This is the OG friends and family definition. And this is how Indian entrepreneurship is built.
Yeah. Correct. Most of our startups are bootstrapped actually.
No, and pre-2005, this is only Indian entrepreneurship.
Correct.
So community-based lending or giving money of this nature, which is seeing live action here. Families being, family homes being pledged. That was how people built.
Sid,
I wish that was the level of responsibility every entrepreneur took to the money that came.
Look into the camera, Karthik. Sid, with like the recent wave of, a lot of startups have had to lay off, etc., etc. How do you, as a startup, look at being able to retain the best talent, and if there's any fear that they have given the last couple of years, how are you able to retain the best talent and prevent them from going to a traditional MNC or so?
The only way is they need to have absolute trust and faith that you will do the right thing with them, right? I think everything else, आप बोल सकते हो मैं तुमको कॉम दूंगा, ये दूंगा, वो दूंगा, there will always be somebody who will beat you in terms of giving them a better comp or a better perk or something like that, right? Most of the team, in fact, what we've seen is people who joined us pre-2015, 2016, people who joined us, everybody struck through the bad times with us, right? People who joined us in that wave, they came, they left. And it was because they ultimately believed that we will do the right thing. I mean, I'll give you a small example, right? We've had to let people go. There are two ways you can do it. One way is you tell people that, hey, there is a PIP, we are doing this, you're not a good performer. We took ownership, we said, guys, we've recruited each one of you. You're all great people. There is no doubt in that. But the reality is that we have to maintain our cost in a certain manner. I don't want to bullshit you guys. We know that all of you have your EMIs and responsibilities. So here's the time period that we're going to give you. But if you don't find a job that pays you as much and you need 2 months extra, that's fine. We'll take you on the roll. वो 2 महीने से कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा. But that actually ensured that surprisingly, or I would say in a lot of ways, in a great way, there's not been a single guy who's gone on any social media and said, you know what, I got fired, I got this, I got that. It cost us just maybe like 15 crores extra. Because 3 महीने का notice था, किसी को 4 महीने रखा, किसी को 5 महीने. But you told guys, we don't want anybody to miss an EMI. We don't want anybody to miss a single fee for the sun or dip into your savings. And when the people who are there, I mean, it's actually a much more positive impact on the people who are there because they know that you are not a mercenary, right? That, okay, you are making a decision, but you're telling them and you're helping them and you're saying, fine, I'm going to do this. And you ensure that when the time comes right and, you know, you're back, you reward them appropriately, right? So that they feel that their belief in you, in the mission, in what you're doing has actually paid off, right? I think that's the only way, right? I think everything else, I think will be jargon.
Yeah, huge respect. So I would say, you know, he already covered a big element of it. I would say it's purpose, culture, impact, and growth. So people align themselves to a purpose. If your company doesn't have purpose, you are going to find it very hard to attract and retain good talent. So people have to find themselves. And in fact, your purpose may be one that, in effect, in my definition, not everybody wants to align to. People have different perspectives and priorities, etc. So you want to find the right set of people who align to that purpose. Culture, which he covered, is very important. Culture is like, I mean, to me, it's, you know, as he said, you know, people can compete with you on comp, people can compete with you on facilities and rewards and benefits and all that jazz. But culture, you're creating the battleground yourself. You are defining your culture, and you know, it's basically talking the talk and walking the walk. It's basically ensuring that it's, you know, clear principles that you adhere to and follow, and that creates trust. Is such a hard thing to build. Yeah. This is the other thing, by the way, that I have a perspective on fintechs on, is that they don't recognize. Some of them don't recognize, I have digressed a bit, the amount of effort and time it takes to create the kind of trust that an HDFC bank, you know, just by saying that word, you know, you're like, okay, I can trust my money there. And when you're dealing with people's money, unlike dealing with a person's car ride or, you know, food delivery, trust is such a huge, important currency. And trust cannot be built in a month or a year or 5 years. It takes decades and decades of repeating consistently the same behavior over and over and over again and not compromising the principles.
And be broken in an instant as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's irreparable damage.
So I think so that's culture piece is very important. Obviously, people join to make an impact, presumably, therefore you are giving an opportunity for people to make an impact, and then how are they growing in terms of their knowledge and experience. And as long as you, I guess, for me, these are the 4 variables, as long as you take care of these 4 variables.
I think as a founder, our reading is, if as a founder, you're clear that these are the principles, you can actually weave them into your hiring process itself, where most of the mistakes happen in the first place, right? And if you let that mistake seep into the org, you're too far removed from the 502nd hire for you to be able to change that. So a lot of people, I'm sure they both do it as well, as long as you're up to employee number 300, 400, you take care of hiring, right? Right now, there's 1 person in our pipeline. We're 50. So for me, it's been slow motion, like ultra slow motion, and I can afford to actually index every person on all of these aspects, literally down to every person in the firm. Can it scale beyond 100? It's tough, right? But I think the ability, the only thing I would add, so this person, for example, not getting that last vibe, for example, and so we're making the person fly down from Bangalore to meet 4 of us. And it's not one of any of our direct reportees. It's 1 level below. Because that person alone could just change the Bangalore culture, could change the trajectory. I can't go and repair that. It's too expensive for me. So I'll double down, we do one more crazy thing, which we never revealed publicly like this, so maybe this is breaking for you. We're the only firm for associate level or higher has to run a candidate through founders.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you've seen that helps how?
They failed the founder test.
Ah.
The founder has a pulse for what is Blume. He's my core customer. And if they sense that this person is not Blume, they'll tell us.
Very interesting.
Because their long-term alignment is with me, not some guy who walked through the door for 30 minutes.
I still spend 25% of my time on hiring and recruitment. I think
not
that hiring
surprised
and
at
recruitment is actually the most valuable activity that you can.
25 to 33% is what I hear from kick-ass CEOs. Right? It depends on scale. And the last, our superpower, and I know you adhere to it here and there, but basically the reason we write so much and project so much is because I find it's the easiest way to disseminate mission and culture. And it's the easiest way to actually get my own colleagues to listen to me.
I would say the same thing, by the way. I think writing is a lost art. Paul Graham,
Yeah, a lot of them did that. Right?
You'll see all these guys,
I'm inspired by
37
those
signals,
guys.
etc.
Right?
Like, I think writing is a superpower.
Whether it's Anderson or Fred Wilson or Paul Graham, you say so much more than trying to haul up 7 people in a room and communicate.
No, plus the advantage of writing is that it's a reusable piece of content.
Exactly.
That people can skip read through, summarize through, etc. You can't do that with videos.
So for
where
us, our culture doc and some of what we put out in the public domain is all a pre-read between letter of employment and acceptance.
And acceptance, okay.
You don't accept without reading. Right?
Talk the walk.
So I don't want you and then learn. You come prepared that this is the org you're joining. Right?
most expensive mistakes are actually hiring mistakes.
Undoubtedly.
Bhavin and Sid, early stage hiring and slightly later stage hiring obviously differ. Any frameworks for you, Bhavin, of would it be fair to say generalists at an early stage and then role specific stuff later, or there's no such framework?
I have a slightly different philosophy compared to a lot of people, by the way. I hate generalists. I myself am not one. I believe that you be master of all trades, breadth and depth, period. And you will see that, by the way, in my organization, whether it's tax, whether it's engineering, whether it's product, whether it's law, whether it's sales, whether it's marketing, I should be able to roll up my sleeves and do any job that any individual in my company can. Perhaps they might be better than me. In most cases, they are. Perhaps they'll be far more efficient because they code every day, or they, write agreements every day, but I will have every nuance. I can understand every nuance. I can opine on every nuance. And I'll tell you why. I keep telling this. So one of the fundamental things that I do when I hire leaders is you should have the ability intellectually to be able to do everything that everybody reports under you can. I think there are, 2-3 reasons why. I don't expect them to actually do it. But how are you going to hire somebody for a role under you to perform a particular task if you don't know all the nuance of that task?
And more importantly, that the person below them is not bullshitting them.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, I believe in depth all across the board, period. Now, I will say this, that when you get to that sort of second half of scaling in a steady state business, that organization can become a matrixed organization, is the conventional terminology everywhere, where you don't necessarily have this philosophy. So through planning, discovery, and halfway through scaling, I basically look at individuals. I'm myself in the trenches to a large extent, but I'm looking at individuals also who bring in the ability to flex across and wear multiple hats. When you get to scaling stage, you start specializing. But even there, in specializing, we have our own culture document, and being hands-on and having depth of knowledge is, so you might now not be a generalist in terms of, as I said, generalist I hate as a word, but you might not know 10 different functions. You know your one function, but in that one function, you are deep. You have no hesitation in going deep where needed, and you have to know everything, basically. I mean, that's the way I operate, period. You work in a function, you know everything about that function.
Sid, do you concur?
To some extent, but I think there are a couple of things. Look at a early stage, right? And again, when you're hiring your first 10, 20 people and you're a first-time founder, right? The number one thing you're going to be looking for is nimbleness, if I may call it, right? Jo aadmi aaj, somebody's doing, let's say, operations today, right? Tomorrow, if you feel that he has to go and be able to, let's say, negotiate better with a pharma company and do procurement, I can't say, sorry, sir, मैं आज warehouse देखूंगा, आज 10 order आए, now I'm going to sit in my chair. It's not going to happen, right? So the first 20, 30, 50 people that you get need to be definitely have a passionate feel about your purpose. Without that, that's not going to happen. And second, they need to be able, they have to be versatile. And I'll give you an example. And it doesn't happen just at the team level, right? It happened between founders. So till 2018, Dharmil used to handle the marketing and the front end, and Dhaval used to handle the back end. 2018, we flipped that. So even at a founder level, if you're able to make those flips, saying that, okay, now you're going to handle the operations and the procurement and the back end, and you're going to handle the sales and marketing, we tell people, then why is it that, you guys can't do it? Number two, you also need to be able, especially as you grow as an organization, to one of the things that he said, that 3 out of 5 founders might not stay or something like that. You need to be able to handle a boss who may come and work alongside you or may have more technical depth compared to you, right? So for example, now Hardik, the guy who actually started we started on the first day together. Till 2019, he was the CTO. He still continues to be the chief architect because he understands, but there are certain things about scaling which we thought maybe he does not know. So we got somebody who used to be the number 2 in Myntra to come and become the CTO. Now you need to have the humility to accept, okay, now I have a guy who knows things better than me, and I'm going to be able to work on it, right? You're still going to be the founder. You're still going to have maybe 100x more equity than that guy, but you need to be able to give that up. Or, we got somebody from Zomato 3 years ago to lead our marketing. That guys, you need somebody who's been there, done that. Now, if you tell me to handle a 12 crore marketing budget or 5 crore, can I do it? I can do it. But if there is a guy who's been there, done that, handled it.
Yeah, why not?
Why not, right? So I think versatility, humility, and passion, I would say these are the 3 most critical things that, look,
Agreed.
Being good at your job is table stakes, right? I don't think any one of us is going to say, hey, this guy is a lazy bum or usko rakh lo. But what are you going to look beyond the table stakes? I would say these are the 3 things that we look for.
By the way, just one clarification, what I was saying when you said the word journalist. I have huge respect for people who have depth. I have huge respect for people who have breadth and depth. I have limited respect for people who have only breadth. That is my concern. So
Depth is critical.
If you're superficial, depth is critical. You can be depth in one area, you can be depth in 10 areas. Breadth, I don't really see how that would function, at least in the way I tend to operate my
Bhavin, I want master of all trades. None of this jack bullshit.
None of the jack.
What can talent do to stand out to you now and or in the early stages? Did someone do something that really stood out to you and said, I want more people to do this, especially when you're hiring?
Ownership.
Yeah, I was going to say the same exact word. Ownership and outcomes. Versus, so it's like, deliver on results basically. Yeah. I would say that people with the right attitude and the right work ethic, with the desire to deliver outcomes, I would take them over people who have substantially higher intellectual, intellectual abilities or knowledge, etc., but don't really actually deliver results or deliver outcomes because they just don't have that work ethic or So reliability, work ethic, ownership. Ownership is actually the perfect term I would use.
Sincerity over super high competence?
It's a dangerous trade-off.
I would say that competence to me is a hygiene factor. So you have a threshold.
Understood.
Yeah, that is...
Post that threshold, I think, to me, I would say people who deliver results and deliver outcomes and are passionate or have a great work ethic, that to me is...
I'll give you one more example. If there are 2 people, let's say, same competence, but maybe let's say one guy even can deliver, let's say, a result of 100 on 100, the other guy delivers 90. But if the guy who's doing 90 can take the team along, can be a team player, and can do that consistently over a period of time versus one guy delivering 100 today, being an asshole, where that the next day it's just him, and if he's not there, you're going to go to 0. I would rather take the consistency of 90, where I know there is that outcome which is for sure, versus one guy who's a phenomenal contributor, but tomorrow if he's not there or if he's worked in a way where if he's not there and then you're just back to 0, I would take that any day.
So our business is very peculiar, where everybody who joins aspirationally should want to be a partner, and the partner doesn't mean anything other than apart from the title that you have reached a stature where you've earned your ownership of capital and your ability to almost run a sub-fund. And you have to have incredible amount of trust amongst each other that you're willing to actually give a part of your future income, leave in the hands of you, right?
Correct.
So because you're allocating.
Yeah, I know, I get it, yeah.
If Tanmay wants to, of course we'll.
But I'm happy to take some of
consider.
that responsibility if you're up for
Yeah,
it.
so basically then what happens is from the get-go, I'm not saying, and somebody misinterpreted it in the firm and they said, oh, you actually demand loyalty. And I've used that phrase once before, so maybe it's my mistake. I said somebody was more loyal than the king, right? So somebody actually grew up almost as, even more missionary than the two founding partners. So I was like, how did that happen? So, and maybe that was misunderstood, but the point is that they were as married to the mission and so determined to show it that they would come across as if they owned the firm even more than us.
How does one do that? How does one like scale culture? Like any anecdotes of something that you've done, Sid?
I think people need to believe that you will be the last man standing, right? Unless they see you do that in practice, it will not happen, right? And I'll give you our examples, right? I mean, we have, every state has its own FDA and therefore its own peculiar way of managing things, right? And there's always going to be something or the other which happens. There are multiple court cases, FIRs that keep coming or happening, and you go along the process. Now, there's two ways to deal with it. You can say, hey, this is a local unit. He's the registered pharmacist over there, and he's gonna face the brand. ठीक है, मेरा legal team आएगा, तुम्हारे साथ बैठेगा, कुछ होगा नहीं तुमको, but तुमको जाके सिर्फ वहाँ पे FD में जाके statement देना है. And when they see that, okay, if something like that happens, you're going to stand there with him and say कि सर ठीक है, नाम के लिए pharmacist है, but I'm the owner, क्या करना है बताओ, right? You do that once, you do that twice. The next 10 times the team knows that even if you don't go, you're going to be waiting, sitting, standing with them as and when something like that happens. Because there have been cases where, and public news, there have been cases where some of our competitors filed an FIR against us for, something. Now the case got squashed, but for a few days there was a warrant lookout for the founders and the team members. And we told them कि यार तुम लोग नहीं जाओगे, पहले हम police station जाएंगे. We'll go give a statement, फिर कुछ होगा देखा जाएगा.
Been there, done that.
Right? Not as high profile as yours. हमारा छोटा मोटा हुआ है. But some of these things happen, right? So if you want them to take, and I'm giving you a very extreme example, but if they see कि you're going to sit over here and say अच्छा तुम देख लो team आएगा, they'll be like boss, something happens, this guy's going to go. Same thing on every single day. If you show up and you show your work ethic and you demonstrate it, I think team gets that you mean what you're doing.
Are there any mistakes you made when you were trying to scale and bleed the culture throughout the organizations? What are some common mistakes that you see people doing?
I think the most common one is hiring mistake, basically there. To me, culture is codifying your values, and then it's all about consistent repetition of behaviors that align with your values without exception. So, really speaking, you're diluting culture when you bring in individuals that are not aligned. And I'm not saying they're bad people. They might not be aligned to those values because different companies need different values, but they might not be aligned to the values that you have in your organization. And if they're not aligned to those values and you accept that behavior and you are fine with it, then you're essentially diluting your culture consistently. So it's culture and trust that are about. It's about repeating consistent repetition without exception of behaviors that align with your values.
Like Amazon has turned this into a process, right? Like appraisals happen only if everyone on the 4 commandments. If you perform well on those, that's how you do it. Have you formed some sort of a process to be able to bleed that?
We have our set of values, right? But I'll give you an example, right? We say our number one value is, and a lot of people maybe agree or disagree with it. Our number one value is we are like family, right? And that is why we use the word mercenary, because I feel that if I can, not just me, the entire team, and I give you that example also, right? Rather than a phenomenal high performer who cannot work well with the team, I would rather take a consistent team that delivers as a well-oiled mechanism, because in our business, we have 15,000 people working with us. I cannot have one jackass coming and spoiling the whole thing. Maybe he may give me short-term results today, but consistently over a period of time, we cannot do that. Number 2, we also work in a field where there cannot be errors. I cannot say, sorry sir, galat dawai aa gayi. Right? Or I can't have someone who's coming and trying to find your vein and poke you 3 times and say, sir, sorry, ye ho gaya, right? So it goes down again in an execution-heavy business where you're dealing with 15,000 people. You are dealing with people who are getting paid 20,000 rupees a month to people who are getting paid like 50 lakhs a month. You need to ensure that people work with a certain shared belief, right? And our belief is that if you cannot think, behave, work like family, then there is no way to deliver, which also means that sometimes you are happy to own up to the outcome of your other guys. And I'll give you the biggest example. There have been several conversations where our VCs have told us that, if you're the CEO, you should take X ESOPs. Your other co-founder contributes this much, he should take Y ESOPs. The third one should... We made a very clear policy that, guys, we worked well together as a team. The team has delivered this, right? I get the liberty of being here, doing a podcast with you. because I know that there is, even on Sundays, there are a bunch of people out there looking at the operations and ensuring that the medicines are delivered to you, right? It's not a business where I can say, sir, sorry, aaj mera branch band hai, main aapko nahi dunga. So even in terms of ESOPs, you may give whatever you want in terms of ratings for founders also, right? Because our NRC and our board will look at it. But ultimately, whatever comes as a pool gets divided equally between us. Because unless you are willing to say, I'm going to step up for my team, today you've had a bad day, tomorrow I might have a bad day. Collectively, let's work for the collective good. But unless you do that now, a lot of people find it counterintuitive because the high performers will feel, yaar, you're subsidizing for somebody else. Our belief is, अगर तुम्हें इतना problem of subsidizations है, तो वो आदमी को निकाल दो. Then that person is not the right fit in your company. But if he's the right fit, today he's having a bad day, tomorrow you might have a bad day, and you have to deliver this as a team.
So the company's family and company's team debate, a sports team debate, you're on the family side.
Yeah.
We get accused of that internally, meaning like a lot of folks say we are not operating like a sports team. We don't chase the target fast enough. We're not brutal enough. So I think we've kind of put it to rest that we're not going to be able to change that. We are also, for good or for bad, or more on the family side.
Yeah, and I guess what works for,
what works for your value system.
What works for you, exactly.
Meritocracy, sports team metaphor, family metaphor, like different
For us, also, if you look at, again, going back to the analogy, if I wasn't clear, if you spend 10 years together, 3 funds, you don't know who's going to win, who's going to deliver the unicorn in each fund. But all of us eat, irrespective of who got you the unicorn. So you've already pre-decided that. It means you took a leap of faith that your judgment is going to lead to it. You took a leap of faith that my judgment. Well, all of us cannot be right all the time, but we get the outcome at the end of the day. So how can you not give that credit to that person that they worked really hard at trying to make that happen over a 3-year cycle of picking and 10-year cycle of nurturing? It's a lot of time to give, right? So basically, our learning has been as you go junior, it's difficult to find this value system match perfectly. So our evaluation process in the first 3 years only indexes on value systems. Because there's nothing to prove from performance perspective. Even the partner doesn't know whether his company is going to work.
Fair enough, yeah.
Right? And then we kick in, we drop the value system piece. You either made a judgment by 3 years or you didn't. And the next 10 years will be on the basis of performance.
And I think the filter is simple. Either you're good enough to be on the team, in the family or not. If you're good enough, then be. If not, then take the tough call and tell somebody, sorry sir, nahi hota hai, right? I mean, so we've had senior level people, including one of our co-founders, jinke saath nahi jama, very early 2016, right? We said nahi jam raha hai saath mein. So you be able to take the tough call and tell people, yaar, we're still very good friends, but nahi jam raha hai.
Do you believe in the hire and fire quick thing? Maybe not hire quick.
Yeah, hire quick, certainly not. Fire quick, I will say fire quick is the wrong word, but I will say one thing. In every kind of relationship, personal or professional, when you decide to, this is going to sound clinical, terminate the relationship or part ways, almost everybody will tell you they wish they had done it sooner. We as human beings tend to procrastinate things, and for the benefit of the other individual and you both.
Yeah, both.
You know, because if something is not working out, we have a human tendency, honesty is kindness is my perspective, right? So we have human tendency to...
It fits into his original framework. It's either you got the value system mismatch or you didn't get the role definition right. In our case, because we were growing very slowly, there was a lot of ambiguity in new roles we were creating. So people didn't know, they were lost. So usually that 1 year equal to 3 years in venture, kind of 1 year in venture equal to 3 years phase, most of our departures are at the 3rd year.
Where were you around during my last breakup? Karthik, amongst some of the best founders you work with, if you can give us by example of some founders who were staring at a doubtful future for their company, what are some of the best founders responded to a situation like that?
The trickiest one in recent times has been like grey orange, which I've never spoken about publicly, but it's the first time in a large company we've had the founder CEO shift. I've never seen it before. So there's new beginnings in that sense, right? Of course, it'll happen 10 more times in the next 2 decades, but and it was tricky. I mean, without getting into the reasons, it felt like, how do you confront those kind of situations? And because it was a predominantly international board, American company, it's learning for me. We don't do the stuff that easily in India. Right? It's amazing that the top management there, maybe because it's very Americanized, it's all acted like professionals. Right? They made their choices, 1 or 2 left, the other 7, 8 stayed. And they're very clinical about it. And for us, we got lucky because we were struggling in our head as to whether the other founder will step in. First volunteer to, because they were already a little bit of friction there. And then actually deliver. It's been 11 months. It's been phenomenal. Right?
Sports team.
Yeah. So that thing worked very well out there. And it meant a rejig of org, cost structures, going out with a new person pitching the vision and mission of the company. And it's not a small company. It's an $80 million company, right, revenue-wise. So, and the learning was that, sometimes it surprises you on who's, somebody you didn't expect to be that great CEO. Actually had a lot of hidden potential, and the person would just be quiet through like 10 years. You didn't know, right? And suddenly the guy stepped up like crazy. So I don't know exactly if I answered your question, but that was an amazing experience. The other one was like, there was a company called Mobstack, which became Beacon Stack and now is renamed Unicode. 13 years. For about the 13-year period, for about 6 years, it was, and I'll say it again in public, it was written down to 0 in our books. Right? Not because Axel wasn't there or we weren't there. Or nobody thought it was worth funding anymore. And we didn't know as the business model pivoted whether these guys had the stamina to give up. That's what happens. 5 years, 6 years, clock is ticking. People are like, these guys just didn't. Just refused to, right? Just kept working at it, iterated, down to like maybe 12, 15 people at one time from a peak of 100 people. And now they're like a 12, $13 million ARR company valued at 100 plus million.
People are amazing.
Last month, we got a full exit from it. And our first fund exits are tricky in how we tabulate them, but from that 0, it's the 5th most valuable exit in that fund, right? Gave back 30-35% of the fund. And it's just, and again, there it was just resilience, persistence, knowing that India is not the market. Again, founders have both moved at different points to the US, despite these harsh circumstances. One aided by something on his family side, the other shuttling between here and there, found product market fit there and started building. And got American love. The other curse about India is that's too old-fashioned or unsexy for an Indian to touch. Right? And that's why they didn't get any love. So they kept bootstrapping. Went 1 to 2 to 3, 4, and then finally the American finds it and says, this is great. Let me put 20 million.
Bhavin, were you ever in doubt? Was there a phase where shit was really tough and you were like, fuck, I need to really dig deep in to get myself out of this?
I think if any entrepreneur says they've never faced that, they're lying. So I don't think there's anybody who's not gone through that. There's tons and tons. I think entrepreneurs in general reframe failure. I have this, talk about that I give also basically, is that there's a very different definition we have for the term. In fact, actually, I guess in some sense in our industry, we have actually rebranded it right now. It's called pivot.
Yeah.
So there's no word failure also, right? We just pivot basically. But that resilience needs to be there. One of the things that I think served me really well from an early age is kind of advice from my father. And, my father actually had two phrases of wisdom that he would repeat countless number of times to a point of frustration, which is one, you can achieve anything you set your mind to. And that becomes like a fundamental belief if repeated often enough. And the second piece, which I think I find that is a common trait amongst all founders, is that success and failure are binary outcomes, right? What you focus on is, did you give it your best? And then that's the only focus you keep driving. Did I give it my best? Did I leave any stone unturned? Okay, that's a mistake I made. I got to fix that. Next time around, I won't leave any stone unturned. And it's funny that if you focus on success or failure, invariably that's the worst way to achieve an outcome because you're trying to look at the destination without the journey. But if you focus on the fact that at every point in time, I'm giving it my best, then no matter what the outcome, you can accept it because you did give it your best with all the information that you had and you figured out what went wrong, which areas you could have improved on. Now you got the opportunity. Fundamentally, you still gain from that process irrespective. You've either gained experience or outcome or both, basically. But you end up framing it in that form that you did your best, you did everything that you could because of either lack of information or in many cases even market conditions or so many other variables that actually decide whether you sort of succeed or fail. And then you have to pivot as we said. But I think that kind of attitude is generally helpful. Just focus on giving your best.
Hardest moment so far and what helped?
Hardest moment?
This podcast.
We are 2 hours in.
I think we've had 3 near-death experiences, right? And I can't say which near death was more, which one did I like more than, all the 3 times I was going to die. So, and each of them I think was larger in magnitude than the previous one. But let's go from the nearest to the oldest. Look, obviously, it's publicly known that we had a challenge with the debt that we had taken. We hoped and prayed that we would get an IPO going and pay off the debt in a couple of months. I think we got greedy because I've taken debt once before in my life, which was at a personal level, which was when we bought the house and we were almost.
Which is very against Guchuk culture, by the way.
Yeah, never. I mean, that debt against the house and putting it, and when we repaid that was the first near-death experience, and I promised I will never take debt again. I got greedy, took it, but with the idea was like, 2 months mein IPO ho jayega, kar denge. The even more stupid thing that we did is, and some people had advised us, but again, sometimes when greed takes over, you do stupid things. There was a pre-IPO round that we were doing. The pre-IPO had like $500 million of subscription. We took only $200 million in the company, and for the balance 300, we got a secondary for our early investors, and we could have used that to repay the debt. The best part is, out of that $500 million, $20 million was put by our team. So, right, so we actually, I don't know how many companies will actually have where founders and team buy stock from their investors at a $5 billion value. Right? And we've done that, right? Fine. So we had that. Obviously, it was a grueling time because we got the approval from SEBI somewhere around 17th of Feb, and I think 21st or 22nd Feb is when Mr. Putin famously decided to make love to Ukraine, and we were at the that was
The thing that had a bearing on your life is kind of insane, right?
But I think one of the things that he said is, if you decide that you're going to give it your best and show your resilience, I think it comes through. I also believe in the power of karma and doing good and doing well. I think your intent also comes across. You may have to take, like I said, hits on your ego. You may have to take tough calls, but ultimately, if you're doing the right thing, people will see through that, right? That whether you did something with an intent to malign or extract something out of it, or if you did it with an honest intent, it is an honest mistake. And I think our mistake, at a personal level, taking that loan against whatever we had of 10-12 crores was a fatal error in 2013-14. Taking a 2,000 crore loan on the company was a fatal error, right? But again, I do believe that at that time, we were doing well. We got out of it. And I think the one instance in between when we actually thought it will go down is, when we had these FIRs, etc. And we've not discussed, but we even got, apparently the cops, wherever it happened, got so pissed off that we had calls from apparently numbers in Dubai and Pakistan and this and that saying ki dhanda band kar do, otherwise you will all go. There were threat calls made to our parents. In fact, some people had actually even shown up to my co-founder's Dharmil's house, and we were actually in 2 minds, boss, is it worth actually taking a bullet because of whatever that was happening? I think wise sense prevailed, and we said, nahi karte hain, let's take a bullet, let's see. But we kind of sailed through that. So I would say these were the 3 hardest moments. And when I mean debt, it's not just my debt. Please remember, it was my family. It was Hardik's grandfather pledging his house, Dharmil's father giving his office. So it was really a lot that we had taken on, right, in order to make these things happen. So 3 experiences where we were literally, once when there was literally threat of a bullet, the other 2 times when I think we were about to go bankrupt. But
you can't choose favorites between them.
I can't choose favorites. Clearly can't choose favorites between them.
I'll add another hallmark of a great entrepreneur that he just quoted multiple times in his narrative, which is, honest, transparent, retrospective, because you'll see no hesitation in saying, I was stupid, I was greedy, I got greedy. Because that's really what helps you, that humility. I'm meeting him, by the way, for the first time, obviously. Heard about and interacted with folks there in general. But huge respect for entrepreneurial community for that resilience and humility of knowing where you screwed up and saying, okay, fine, I'm going to give it another go, fix what didn't work and be on it.
Awesome, guys. There's a lot to learn. Before we wrap up, before we go, advice to your 20-year-old self and 30-year-old self.
I'm 35, does it count?
All right, we'll do 15 and 25. 15 and 25 for you. For the table.
For me, I think I was writing, I think you had alluded to it in the introduction, 2 MBAs. One was incredible set of relationships I formed at IIM Bangalore, 180 of them. probably in touch with half the class. So I won't take that back, but one MBA too much. So 20 basically now.
Which one was the extra one, you think?
No,
Wharton
the first
or-
one, because I don't think there's any point not working and going and doing an MBA. So if you really want to do an MBA, you should work and go. It's just that back in the late 90s, mid 90s, when I was writing that CAT, there was other than machine shops, literally shop floors, engineers didn't, or coding. Those are the only two options engineers got out of engineering school. Nothing unhonorable about it, but if it didn't interest you to be sitting in Jamshedpur or some other Bhilai or whatever, that's all the jobs you got. Or you're sitting in front of a comp and code. So it was very enticing. 60% of my class were freshers out of. But I don't think it has much value. When I do my second one, you see the professionalism around it. It's a very different class, very different conversations, very different aspirations. You're actually switching. So that's more around. So every time people say, why do you do two? What is the difference between the two? I said, boss, if you can afford to work for 3 years and you get a good job, please work. Don't do that. The 30-year-old, it was the time when I decided US was not my home for the posterity and decided to start thinking about moving back. So actually, in some sense, in my head, one of the best thought process that started. In a more humorous way, the wife says we should have had the kid there and at least had her be an American citizen. But she was born the other side of my India comeback. But yeah, maybe you should have the kid there.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Bhavin?
Piece of advice. I think I'll go back to kind of what I said before, which is that, as I said, I believe in making the largest possible impact you can in your life. I think that each of us has a moral obligation to do that. And this realization that actually a larger proportion of the impact you can make is a result of the problem space that you select. And I used to be one of those, it's a great cliche, you can say it all the time. I believe now it's a hygiene factor, not really the way to go, which is everybody says, choose an area you're passionate about and give it your all and you'll get like magnanimous results. And I'm sure that's a hygiene factor is required. But it's not entirely true. Meaning that you could end up choosing an area which has a very low impact and still spend that same 24 hours working every single day and make that small impact. So because there is such a disproportionate attribution to the problem space that you select, it justifies spending an adequate amount of time
to select it.
To select that space, to select the right problem space, the right place you want to sort of spend that time in, etc. And I think I didn't do that in all my opportunities.
So this is your 30 decision or 20 decision? 30.
30 decision.
Yeah, 30.
I think as a 20-year-old, I presumably made, reasonably. I started my first company when I was 17. Arguably could apply there also because we picked, internet was booming. We said, let's sell this sort of, spades and pickaxes. So we started, selling web hosting and domain names, etc. as direct tie-in. And did well. But I honestly think that each time, if time was spent in discovering, when we started Zeta, we actually spent almost 9 to 12 months in just doing what I call homework between me and my co-founder Ramki. But time spent in that discovery is actually going to create the biggest value, differential in there are spaces out there that can clearly apparently absorb $7 trillion of capital. I know that that's a media statement. But the fact of the matter is that there are clearly opportunities out there. You still have to put in the same number of hours every day. But there are opportunities out there that can make a bigger impact. And if I was to go back, I would say spend greater amount of time in the discovery phase to pick that right opportunity.
15.
15.
No, I'm kidding. You can just do 10 years ago.
No. Okay, so I would say maybe 10 years ago, I just think that there was a lot of fun in working on a certain thing with a certain number of people that you really trusted, cared, and could make an impact about, right? I think sometimes you try and do too many things because things appear cool or sexy or, they seem like, that seems like the big thing. I think sometimes when you know something's working, it's good to be boring, right? Like you said, it's good to be boring sometimes and just continue doing that and doing that and doing that. And those are the things which will ultimately, create value. So if I look at our journey, there was like this great curve from 2012 to I would say 2019. Then it went up, went down and came back. it could have just very well easily been that same straight thing, because everything that went up were the exact same thing that we cut off, because those were the, like I said, the cool things, the sexy things, because we wanted to make a statement. I think it's just sometimes good to have simple things, do it with people that truly matter and care, because I still believe, I think most of us would be working maybe 15, 16 hours a day, maybe more. If you can't really have fun and think of going to work like you're going to a party in some sense, right? I mean, you really have to enjoy it. And I think for me, the ability that I can go to work with my friends, the same people, I mean, and we were speaking about, there's a joke, right? It's been 8 years since I've been married. Out of the approximately 40 vacations I've taken, 35 of them, Dharmila has been with me, as an example, with his wife, right? So if I can't go to a break or a vacation with the guy, there's no point of working with the guy, right? So I really need to have that space to be able to do that. And I think that's where magic happens ultimately. At least that's what's worked for us.
Cliches are cliches for a reason. Gentlemen, thank you so much for spending time with us, and see you guys on the next episode.